When I lived there, I had some weird hours. I normally wasn't home before 3 a.m. It was the proverbial dark and stormy night. I was driving home and I felt a thump. And I backed up and looked around, didn't see anything, so I went on home. Later that morning, a West Virginia state trooper and a Jefferson County Sheriff's deputy turned up with a warrant for me. I said, "What are you talking about?" "You violated a state law. You hit a domestic animal and drove away without rendering assistance." "Well, I felt a thump. What did I hit?" I said, "You hit a pig." And I thought for a minute and said, "Well, how do you know it was me?" And the trooper said, "The pig squealed." That leads me to one of my favorite stories. I have this old open touring car. As I said, some of my stories are true, or a little bit true. I do have that old touring car. It's a replica of a '29 Mercedes. I drive it around on the back roads in good weather. I was down Rutherford County, and I'm driving along this sort of a back lane, and there, off to my left, there's a farmhouse, and in the yard, there's a three-legged pig. Wow. And always looking for an opportunity to work on my shyness, I went over and knocked on the door, and the farmer came out. I said, "What's with the three-legged pig?" Mister, that's a good old pig. That's my good old pig. They don't make pigs like that no more." I said, "What, really?" "Yep, my good old pig here about 3 months ago, he done saved our lives." I said, "How'd that happen?" "Oh, mister, my good old pig, I heard him out there 3 o'clock in the morning squealing. I thought a coyote done got after my good old pig. And I went out, the back of our house was on fire. That pig woke us up and saved our lives, the whole family." "Is that how he lost his leg?" "No, mister, good old pig like that, you don't eat him but one leg at a time." Then, a couple of months ago, January, a couple of months ago, I ran into that farmer here at the local farmer's market. I said, "How's your good old pig, your good old three-legged pig?" Oh, we done ate the other 3 legs." I said, "Oh, so now he's a groundhog?" Over across the border in South Carolina, there's a small town that I go to quite frequently. I know a lot of the people down there. Some of the people are cops. There was Roy Martinez and his wife Tina. Okay, now this is, I forgot to talk about Feghoots. I will later. And Roy was a sergeant on the police force, and Tina was a corporal. She had passed the test to be a sergeant, but there were no vacancies. So she had to sit there and wait for a vacancy. And then tragedy struck. She was diagnosed with renal cell carcinoma, one of the nastier cancers you can get. On her deathbed, she said to Roy, "All I want to do is to put on those sergeant stripes before I die." Roy resigned his sergeancy so she could be promoted on her deathbed. At the funeral, Roy started talking about Tina and said, "You know, I'm going to miss her the most in the morning, because it was our morning ritual that we would come downstairs and we would take rye bread and we would toast it extra crisp, dip it in milk and eat it. I know you're up there somewhere. Dunk rye for me, Sergeant Tina." That is a Feghoot, as opposed to a joke. It's a short story with an atrocious pun ending. But that's not the end of the story. Roy sat down and a woman stood up and said, "Roy, could I say a word?" "Of course." She said, "Plethora," and sat back down. And Roy said, "Thank you, that means a lot." Down there's a big lake. Luke, this guy I met, bought a new bass boat. Big old thing. He got it early in July, so he christened it the 4th of July, and he wanted to take it out for its first run at the bass. He called his friend Opie and said, "Opie, I've got beer in the boat. I've got bait in the boat. The only thing I don't have in the boat is you. We're ready to go." Opie said, "It's going to be a while. I've got to drive down to Sumter to take my wife to see her cousin. Juan is an OB, and he's offered to give us free obstetrical care for this pregnancy, and that's worth a lot of money to me. Juan's a good guy." 2 hours later, Luke is pacing back and forth on the dock. The wind is building up a little bit, and the boat is rocking. Opie turns up, grabs his fishing pole, and heads towards the boat, where Luke has untied the front painter, and the wind came up. Luke fell into the water between the boat and the pier. And that's when Obi-Wan's kin Opie saved Luke from the dockside of the Force. Few people know about Alphonse Barade. Dr. Barade was, with emphasis on was, one of the foremost geneticists in the world. So foremost that he had developed a strain of swine that were hypoallergenic with respect to humans. Their organs transplanted directly. No cyclosporin, no other anti-rejection drugs. The patient got the new organ and went home, and that was the end of it. He was working on a refined strain. These pigs were 18 feet long, 12 feet in diameter, big animals. Each one had 10 hearts, 6 kidneys, and 2 livers. You could harvest from them. Can you imagine what that would mean to the world, to have basically an unlimited supply of organs that you got just by breeding pigs? These animals were so big that they couldn't move. They were so big that humans couldn't handle them. So Barade cloned dozens of gorillas and trained them to take care of these swine. There was another problem. The genetic dice had run afoul, leading to the worst breath any animal has ever had in these pigs. It was so bad the gorillas couldn't get close to them without stuffing hands full of breath mints into the pigs. It was a major expense. Barade made a fatal mistake. He was in the lab one day. One of the gorillas dropped a bucket of breath mints. Barade backhanded that gorilla. Shouldn't have done that. The police report concluded that 76 strong clones fed the pig Barade with 110 chlorets close at hand. March 9th, 1916. This part of the story is true. Pancho Villa conducted a raid across the border from Mexico into New Mexico, shot and killed about a dozen soldiers and half a dozen civilians. He suffered quite a few casualties himself and retreated back across the border. Blackjack Pershing, this is before World War I, Blackjack Pershing was a major and was sent to find and punish him. He could not find him. One of Pershing's lieutenants said, "Do you know what we can do? We can bring some of those little naval gunboats up the river and we can shell them on their side of the border." Sounded like a good idea. So they were putting the plan into action, and of course Pancho Villa heard about it and called in his lieutenants and said, "What can we do? These things are going to be a problem." And one of his lieutenants, who knew quite a bit more about naval affairs than did Pancho Villa, said, "We'll take these garbage scows and we'll take them down and we'll sink them at the mouth of the river, and the boats won't be able to get up here." Villa sneered and snarled, "Barges? Barges? We don't need no sinking barges."